Welcome back to Spitballin Cards. In today's video, we're going to be talking about wax prices being too high, repacks becoming a new thing, as well as really great Black Friday deals that have happened this last week. In today's episode, you have me, Scott from Scotty B Cards. We have Ty, aka Teapot. He's on the Market Movers channel and Sports Card Investor channel. We have Phil with the Filmington YouTube channel. And we have half of the Blabbin' About Slabbin' team with Jeff. Chris is doing something somewhere fun. So he's not here this week, which is totally fine. Chris, sup, man? How are you? But let's jump into this. So we have a lot of really fun topics to discuss. The very first one I want to discuss is going to be in regards to Bowman Draft. Bowman Draft was released. It's what, $500+ a box. It's an expensive product. Historically, Bowman has been the very best investment product, simply because, that's the Bowman Chrome first autographs, and those are usually the most sought after cards of every player if they have them. And so I want to discuss the pricing of that product compared to historical years, wax prices in general. So what do we think? Ty, what do you think on these new prices? Do you think they're too high? Are you totally cool with it and you see the reason for it? What's your thoughts?
One of the big reasons I shifted into collecting more baseball, or at least I'll say opening more baseball wax, is because Topps product has historically been much cheaper than the skyrocket that has been Panini stuff. I still can't really wrap my head around Panini product prices. And basketball cards in general tend to be really inflated compared to baseball. Football has kind of jumped into that same lane now, and football's been skyrocketing in many cases. So in some ways, I'm sort of coming at this from, a convert to baseball and Topps and saying, well, this isn't actually that expensive. Now, with that being said, we have seen prices continue to tick up, while we've also seen pack odds continue to get harder to hit. I'll be really interested to see what happens when basketball and football licenses fully come over to Topps and how those products are priced, especially Topps Chrome when it comes out, because that's like the big buzz for both football and basketball collectors. Overall, I mean, obviously there's a lot to do with breakers opening product. Everybody knows that they're opening a significant portion. I guess I'd be curious from your perspectives, do you guys have a sense of just how much or what percentage of like new product breakers are opening versus what's actually hitting just individual consumers?
Phil, what's your thoughts?
32.87%.
There we go.
I have no idea. I think, I might be in the minority here, but I think with wax prices, yes, you could compare it to other sports and be like, well, if Panini's like really out of equilibrium between like what singles are worth and what the wax is worth, then why would Topps correct itself in time? I do think a lot of this is because of the advent of group breaking specifically, where folks can kind of have, if not like a budget entry, a more economical entry into a specific team, player, random team, random division, whatever. And, they're doing it for the dopamine hit. So yes, if you look back 10 years ago, the price of wax, regardless of the sport or the product, is going to be a lot more expensive now. Also, we just saw like 10 years worth of inflation hit over the last 18 months or so. So like, I get it, like 2 years, 3 years after the product's been released, then it's really kind of speculators and supply and demand, and the price is being set in the secondary market based on whoever's looking to speculate on it. But if we're talking about on release date or shortly after release date, when the manufacturer is selling the product or retailers selling the product, and it's being sold as an experience, is that something? So like you look at SRP prices for retail blasters. Do you think those are going to go back from 30, $35 down to 20? Like you look at the inflation that we've seen with restaurants, like food inflation is up. Some of this is service related. This gets into other things and more complex things that us aren't smart enough to even talk about. But there was a good amount of inflation that hit the service industry and that hit foods. So like those prices aren't going to come back down. Like small coffees aren't going to go back down to 5-10 years ago. So I guess at the end of the day, is this product, I know it's a luxury item. I know a lot of the things that are still cheap right now are things that we want and don't need. But the fact that a lot of people are addicted to this, and it is an experience, and we've seen inflation across other experiences and services, does that explain some of this in addition to group breaking? And I just can't see this fixing itself. I think there's a greater chance that these markets are going to stay like this versus converging over time to something that makes sense to a lot of people.
So I want to hear your thoughts, Jeff. But I do want to say, while yeah, I understand the inflation. Blaster boxes were $20 since I was a little kid buying blaster boxes. Like that's the price they've been. So the actual price jump's not that crazy, but I think the quality of what you're getting is significantly worse than even when they were $20 because it's so watered down nowadays. I guess my thing is while we can speculate and say, yeah, it's partially because of inflation, and that's probably true. Yeah, that's definitely true. Not even probably true. I would say by far the biggest difference though has to be in regards to breakers. Breakers are buying this stuff like crazy. And Ty, to answer your question, what percent did they open? I would venture to say it's at least 50%, right, of the product that gets opened by breakers. And for that purpose, there's just a huge demand for breakers to do it because people like me, like the Rockies, I can get to these teams cheap. And it makes it so it's more affordable in that sense. But for a majority of people, it's not more affordable and it's feeding into the gambling addiction. And so like the pastime of opening up a cheap hobby box isn't as normal as it used to be. And I don't think it ever will be again. And so I do think with the dropping price of singles and the rising cost of box breaking and wax, it just doesn't make sense to me, especially with the cost of living going up as much as it is. And so I think there has to be a breaking point at some time. I don't know what it's going to be, but like it can't keep going the way that it is. And it's going to get higher in the next few years. But Jeff, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with everything that we've been talking about. It's at the end of the day, it's just a simple supply and demand situation, right? Fanatics wants to make the most money possible, and the demand is there for them to increase these prices. And the only way they would go back down is if they started selling less, which does not seem to be at all the case, despite all the external economic factors. So I don't see it going back down unless I guess it's possible that if the singles market continues to dive, then some people stop seeing the value maybe in buying into so many breaks, and it'd be a domino effect, but that's going to take a long time for that to happen.
It's not a good thing if it happens. It's tough. Like I don't want to wish it's going to happen for them to get cheaper because, if we like cards and we care about it, it's inevitable. It's already on the decline slightly a little bit right now, but it's not a great thing. So Phil, what are your thoughts? I see you thinking over there.
Yeah, I know it's interesting because I could have a counterpoint right now and then have a counterpoint to that counterpoint. What I'm going to bring up is product that's 3 to 4 years old. So a product like 2018 Topps Update, for instance. So how much of that stuff is being broken today by breakers on whatnot? That year's product in general, not much. I know this because I try to do loop and whatnot. There's no demand for older product. There's very little demand. In rare circumstances, you're going to find a niche, but what I'm saying is that group breaking can't really be adding value in inflating cost of 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old product. And you look at that stuff, and the value proposition is even worse in most cases versus opening up newer stuff. That's 1, 2, 3 months old. So, but the thing with older wax is it's actually expected, like Rudy from Alpha Investments talks about this on his channel. Over time, the relationship between the sealed configuration and its underlying components weakens. So it's expected that ROI gets worse in time. So that helps explain that, if the group breaking dynamic doesn't, if that's not connected to inflating prices of older product.
Yeah, and I guess my counterpoint to your counterpoint is just the fact that's 6 years ago, by the way, not 3 to 4 years. It's crazy. It's 6 years ago. But a lot of that product's been opened. And so, yes, it's the same concept you're saying, but a lot of it's opened by breakers. Like in 2018, breakers were still opening up a ton of 2018 Topps Update with Shohei Ohtani. And if that wouldn't have been the case, I doubt those prices would have been as high as they are today because a lot of it was opened by them. And so I think it's a breaker-driven market. But I see what you're saying. And it's not like I'm here and I'm anti-breakers or anything like that. I just think that, especially if Topps continues to push this route with, Topps or Fanatics Live, forgive me, Fanatics Live, and that's like the breaking platform. It's just they're leaning into it. I don't know if that's good for the average collector, but maybe it's not my job to worry about what's good and not good for the collector. Ty, do you have any thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts still swirling around this. I've had a really hard time pinning down who all the people are buying into breaks. I mean, I know a good number of people who like to occasionally rip sealed product, and I like to rip sealed product from time to time. It's fun. It just feels very nostalgic, and usually I know I'm going to get crushed, but there's like a certain price threshold where I'm like, I just can't justify this. Now I'm talking about skipping a really cool card that I would pick up or doing something else substantial with this money. It's just basically like throwing it in the trash can most of the time. But I don't personally know a lot of people who buy into breaks. And so that's where my mind is going right now, is like the consumer psychology of this and trying to figure out, is it the same people who were buying into Topps Update breaks in 2018 still buying into tons of breaks now? Or is there like a new crowd of people like washing in? Because I do hear a lot of people say that their first foray into the hobby or back into the hobby was through breaking.
Was for me.
And then they got out of it. And then
Yes.
they were like, oh, I'm just like losing money, and they got out of it. So that's what I'm having a hard time gauging. Is Phil mentioned like, what inning are we in? I don't know. I don't know if there's like this big wash still coming through that a lot of people can only get burned so many times before they're just like, oh, this isn't a great value proposition. What am I doing? And then there's also just that process of like collector maturation, which is, evolving your thought process, going after things that are more meaningful and long lasting, rather than like the fleeting rush of hitting some gold shimmer speckle to 50 that, is some sixth variation of a gold.
I agree with that because, Rudy from Alpha Investments, again, not to dive into this just being an analysis in his commentary, but he was even talking about how when he would post content back in 2017 versus 2020 versus 2023, he's seen his comment sections change. And he was kind of saying how that's most likely due because the lifespan of people in the hobby that's like active as a hobby is very quick. And so because of that, people come in and those are the individuals that spend big money on breaks. And then, like you said, they might get burnt and leave, or they just, but I'm just saying the way Fanatics is pushing things, they're putting more marketing dollars than ever behind getting into these breaks. And so it probably is just newer people to the hobby, which is unfortunate because it can leave a really sour taste in their mouth.
Yeah, on that note, and the folks at Blowout Forums just debate this to no end, but who are the types of people? Like, what's the cohort, like Ty saying? I think there's probably three types. There's the people that can afford it and know they can afford it. The people that think they can afford it, but it's not sustainable for them to keep doing it. Then there's like the true ballers that can afford it. But then you wonder, like, well, how would they be rich if, they have those sort of tendencies,
Yeah.
Because money at the end of the day is finite for most of us, right? So like, how is this sustainable over time? But that's a good point, Scott. If these folks keep on rotating in and out, there's always going to be a group behind them, presumably. But like at the end of the day, won't the masses be smart enough to understand like futures betting and just sports gambling in general, which maybe is where Fanatics is going anyways. And that could be another topic, right, for another video. But isn't the value prop a little bit higher, a lot higher doing that? I think that the slot machines in Las Vegas have a minimum payout percentage of like 90%. It's like a state or like a county rule. And Wax doesn't have that. and Ty knows that with the other sports. So yeah, man.
You just said, will the masses ever be smart enough to figure it out? No. No, because I don't think like, and it's not against individuals, but we get also excited about stuff. And then we get irrational about stuff. And then, you know what I mean? And like you said, spending money is really easy to do, especially when you don't realize it's a gambling addiction. Yeah. And I'm not saying all breakers are bad. That's not what I'm starting to say. Jeff.
Yeah, I just wanted to go along with something Phil said earlier, is that it's all about the experience. And I think you said, Scott, that they are marketing more breaks. And you see that with Fanatics Live. Now they have this platform that people can have on their phone that's going virtually 24 hours a day of all different types of breakers, that they're really pushing that breaking as an experience. So you're not just buying the cards, you're buying into the hosts that they have on there, the different bonuses they offer, things like that. So I think we're going to continue to see that increase, the amount of energy and investment put into that side of it to make the experience that people keep coming back for, even if they don't necessarily get any sort of return on that.
People do form connections, right? They form connections, and then they want to kind of support a person or a group. I've heard a lot of people say that about live selling, And I know some people just somebody was just saying that about Ryan Card Collector 2, and like they like getting on his live selling streams and buying things because they just feel like they're part of a community, even being remote, even not being in Ohio where his shop is. They're like, I like his content, I like what he does, I like kind of his hustle and his story, and so I'm gonna go in here and buy a few cards from his live stream because I like supporting what he's doing. I think there's something to that, like you're saying, like with breaking, there are some benefits to it. Like if I only want to go after Tigers cards or Braves cards or whatever, I can do that in a break. I can't do that just by opening a box. So that increases my odds of getting really meaningful cards. But then, like you said, other people also like that connection. If they're really good at the live chat, or like I had a breaker, and I don't buy a lot. Hobby Legends, I think they're out of California, and I bought into some breaks or several years ago, 2019 with them. And I did like 2 breaks, and then I got in a third time. I mean, these guys are breaking all the time. And I got there in the chat, and he like remembered who I was. And I wasn't doing content or anything for SDI back then, but he like remembered who I was and was like, "Oh, hey Ty, good to have you back, man. Did you get those Sekou cards?" Like just knew. I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. And I think some breakers are really good at establishing that connection. So that it's almost like, yeah, I'd almost rather you rip my cards and send them to me than maybe I do it too. Some people feel that way.
Yeah, I get that. I do want to say, I really like specific breakers, and I've been watching their content for years. They got me back into the hobby 10, 5, how many years it's been now? 2018 was 6 years ago. So probably 10 to 15 years ago. But people spend, if you actually look at how much product breakers open, it's pretty mind numbing. Like I'm looking at Blez right now on their YouTube channel. They've had 120 boxes of definitive opened in 2022. So like if each of those boxes are $3,000, it's getting pretty crazy. But like the average card shop, if there's card shops, they only have maybe 2 or 3. They have a case of that product. And so it's just like this never ending supply. And I think back in the day, you might be restricted to how much you open based off of what your card shop had. But now at the internet, you can always find a box break from Leighton or Blez or Cardsmith breaks or whoever it's going to be to satisfy that itch. And that's why I think breaking is going to be crazy moving forward. So
super high-end product definitely is disproportionately opened by breakers, like way more than 50. Like I don't remember, I heard a number either a year ago, whenever we were debating whether or not Backyard Breaks was getting like loaded boxes and all that stuff, it's something like 80 or 85% of flawless basketball was opened by breakers.
Oh, I believe it.
It was like a very, very high amount. Like barely anybody, consumers, just ripping that open. So that's it's definitely way more weighted with the high-end product than just like the everyday flagship top stuff.
The average person can't afford. How much is flawless? I'm out of touch with basketball compared to baseball.
Oh my gosh, it's
like 10 grand a box. Am I crazy to say that? 5 grand?
I can look it up.
Let's ask Phil. Phil's the wax guy.
18 flawless with Luca in it was selling for like 20K in 2020, 2021. Maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, there was a box of flawless basketball that sold for 29K in May 2018. But like, yeah, I was gonna say it's like like 5K for the last few years of football and basketball for a box. So
if you break that out to $100 a team, $150 a team, it's more reasonable for an average person.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I don't want to beat this horse to death. And so I think we can jump to the next topic, which kind of piggybacks off of this one. And Phil, you were really mentioning this, and Neo, he actually was talking about repacks becoming a bigger thing. And we've seen repacks. We know what repacks are. It's someone actually buying back cards on the secondary market and then selling boxes or their own packs of that. And so there's usually a higher floor to repacks simply because you were going to get a decently cool card. But at the same time, you can do a lot of sketchy things with repacks, which is why they have a bad taste. You know what's in each pack sometimes, and there's some issues there. So repacks are becoming big, and I want to just kind of discuss this. If we think this is a solution for the average person with breaking becoming a little bit crazy at this point. Phil, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the way Neo had positioned it, Northeast Sports Cards and Comics, or I think now it's Neo Sports Cards and Comics on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter, since I don't shout out anyone. And my favorite breaker is Run Good Life. And Neo is saying that he's positioning like repacks as for the situation that we have with so-called wax prices and singles prices being out of proportion and out of equilibrium. So this is a way to give the customer, the end consumer, the breaking client a higher floor and a potentially a comparable or higher ceiling and a better experience as a result. They still get the same dopamine hit because they don't know what they're going to get, and they're probably going to get skunked, and they'll be okay, and they'll come back for the next one, right? I guess the whole idea here is like this could be us circumventing the issue, which is group breaking causing prices to be super high. So group breaking is now coming in to, I guess, try to fix the issue or provide us some better alternatives.
And is it really fixing the issue? Because like obviously singles are dropping, so they're coming in and buying singles in order to put them into packs of cards to then resell again. Now it's kind of artificially inflating some of the singles market because the people who pull those cards, who get them in a break, nobody wants them. They just resell them. And it's like a cycle at this point where people are just flipping these cards and they don't really want them. Is kind of my concern about repacks. Because if you pull, you know, I can't think of a specific card, but let's say it's worth $50 and then a repack guy buys it for 60. It's a fake comp. There's a whole bunch of things that opens up for me. Ty, what are your thoughts?
There's two main motivations, to why somebody puts a repack together with different cards. One is if they're buying, at 80, even 80%, 85, 90% of comps, they can make a mix of the product. And let's just assume like full transparency. They're just giving you like a full checklist. There's still not a lot of people like comping out each of those cards and then doing the math and like figuring out how much. So there's margin on both ends in most cases. So one is just purely monetarily driven, and that's why you would put it together. The second is that it's an extremely easy way to liquidate cards that you don't otherwise have a good way to move.
Yes.
And that's probably the bigger driver of the two, or just as much of the story. You mentioned like the secondary wave where somebody hits those cards. A lot of repackers have like a buyback program where they'll buy it back instantly, the same card that you just hit that you didn't want, for 80, 75, 80% of the value of the card. And now you're just like creating this permanent cycle of stuff. Somebody's got to want these cards, whether they're in a repack or not, or otherwise at the end of the day. When I did a video on like the staggering grading numbers and thinking, how many graded cards does the average person really want to collect and own long-term? Like graded cards, they take up more space, they're heavier. You got to store them a little bit differently sometimes. Like you start doing the math and it's like these million plus cards being graded by PSA every month. Many of those cards are in this category of like, does anybody actually really want this? And we're seeing some of those prices as I'm looking in, market movers and reviewing data, like PSA 10 copies of rookie cards from 2, 3, 5 years ago coming down and selling for 99 cents. So there's sort of the inevitable conclusion of that. So some of these cards are just stuck in the spin cycle of the repack. And I'd be really curious to find a way to like track one of these cards, like through how many cycles and hands it goes through and which channels for the span of a year, 2 years. There's a lot of different ways that people are making like some cream off the top as these things just keep on recycling. So I don't know. A lot of people are really passionate about repacks, sort of saying they're definitively evil or they're this, that, and the other thing. I think if a repack is well done, it can be, like you said, a much better value proposition than sealed product. I don't really see how it's any different than sealed product in many ways, except that it maybe you have better odds. I have personally never bought a repack. I don't know if I would.
I've bought repacks when you buy them from Fairfield at Walgreens or whatever as a kid. Those are basically just repacks at the end of the day. They're just buying and then buy them at a discount, mix things and mark it up 20% and sell it.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's new to the hobby in that way. Jeff, what's your thoughts?
I don't have too much to add besides what you guys have talked about already. My interest is where these buyers are, because like Scott had mentioned, or maybe it was Teapot that mentioned where the buyer's coming from for breaks. people new to the hobby, people who have been in the hobby. And I'm just wondering if it's the same for repacks. Is it a lot of people that have been burned by breaks, so they feel like, well, here's a way to get Phil's dopamine hit without having to get zero? You know, you're going to get something. Or is it also people just coming brand new into the card market and thinking that this is just the way things work? So I'd be interested to know that. I'm not too in tune with the repack market, although I just know it's thriving because every time you go to shows, you see people buying solely for that purpose. And on a lot of these websites as well, people are buying at a certain percentage just to put in repacks. So I know it's a thriving business. I just don't know too much about the individuals that are participating.
Yeah, I'll add a few things here. So, you know, the way Neo kind of positioned it, it was more as like, this is what the breakers have decided to give a different experience, and this is what, ultimately this is where there is consumer demand versus knowing that they're going to get taken with group breaking. I see this also as like, I see people that don't want to play by Fanatics rules anymore and aren't able to source product. Product as in wax, and as a result they're looking to be creative, inventive, and how can I bring a product to my customers. And I actually know some people that I'm really close to that are considering doing something similar, because they're not able to source product directly through Fanatics, and it's gotten tougher to buy off sites like DealerNet for 20% or 30% under secondary market prices. So I think there's something there too. One of the things that I was thinking of when I heard the Neo argument was like, well, repacks have been around for a while, right? These aren't new. These are actually super popular. The last couple nationals, there were 3 major companies that had like 5-6 people that were just like snaking around tables. We're talking like either Tuesday or Wednesday before the general public's even there, and they're buying at 90%, and they're causing so much demand, which is great if you're a seller. It's not great depending on your perspective, right? If you're looking to buy at the national, it's great if you're looking to sell at the national. This is happening at all car shows around country. So I'm like, so this, because it's not new, or if this was a symptom of the sky high wax prices, then wouldn't this also be a remedy? Because with demand for repacks, you also have demand for singles, sourcing singles. And wouldn't the prices of those then go up to then go back in line with wax? And then, as we were talking about before the show, Scott, you brought up a great point. With wax, you consume it once and it's gone, right? Open up this product, it's no longer wax. It's consumed. If I'm buying it, not everybody's buying it to break it, but let's assume that a lot of people are, right? With group breaking, that's certainly the case. It's gone at that point. You can't resell that. With a repack, you can sell it a million times afterwards. And as we all talked about, a lot of these aren't forever cards. The people that are opening these repacks aren't forever type people anyways. These cards that you're getting also aren't gradable. So they're probably going to be resold right away, right? That's one of the things with a repack buyer is you're probably not a guy that likes to grade a whole lot, or you're not expecting to grade a whole lot out of that pile that you're getting.
Yeah, I agree with that. Obviously, it's one of those things where at the end of the day, nobody wants them. They're only bought for a repack. If it would have meant the repack, they would have just sat there forever and they would have dropped in price. And maybe a collector at that point would have wanted it, but the collector didn't have a chance because someone bought it for a repack only. And it's just weird. It's just weird. But overall, I think that we are in a very interesting position where we're seeing single prices dropping. And I know that that's a negative for a lot of people who own singles or bought at the peak. And I want to be conscious of that. But I think it's going to remedy a lot of this. As prices drop, things are going to be figured out. And I think there's going to be opportunities for those that are smart, as long as you know if you're really educated on one player or on one type of set or on one specific thing, there's going to be opportunities to make money still. And that's what I want to just make sure is clear. It might not be a bad thing the way things are trending.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, not even just to make money, but if you're looking for something specific that you've been priced out of over this huge boom, there are good opportunities to buy, especially, I mean, you see some of these new products come out, like even Definitive. I'm seeing some cards from there sell for $5, $6, $10 on eBay. And you think out of a $2,000 box. So there are a lot of opportunities at the low end for player collectors and set collectors just to get more unique card that historically have just the last few years have just been rising so high.
And I think that that has been the journey of a lot of collectors that have come into the space. You've probably seen this, Ty, with your sports card investor Facebook group. A lot of folks come in, and if they last 6 months, they usually change their tune a little bit. They open a lot of stuff when they're new. They try to find out what products they like, and they're like, "Whoa, I can't do this. I'm going to move to just buying singles." So you see a lot of those stories being retold. People complaining on Sports Cards and Nonsense Facebook group about, "Oh, I got skunked. I'm done with this hobby." Hey, do what I did. I was just like you. Now I just buy singles. And those people stick around. You know, it doesn't mean once you give up opening wax that you can't be part of the hobby and you won't like it as much. You'll learn to like it in different ways, if not more. And your wife will like you even more for it too.
Maybe yeah, that's a great point, Phil. Maybe that's Top's plan. Fanatics plan. Get them in through opening cards and all these breaks, and then they're hooked on cards forever. Maybe it's just the gateway drug to us right now all being addicted to buying singles as we are.
And these group breakers, I mean, they're an extension of Fanatics marketing. Like, we got to give these guys some credit. Like, YouTubers, like all of us, have brought people into the hobby, but these group breakers, especially the huge ones, I mean, they've been instrumental to the success of growing the hobby over the years.
I totally agree. I do think that's a good place to stop for this segment today. The last thing I want to do is let's do some shout outs if anybody has some. I actually do have one, and I want to share my screen and show this collector's page because I think it's so refreshing. And if anybody else has one, feel free to pull that up so we can look at it after. But my shout out right here is to psa.collector on Instagram. His page is a lot of fun to follow. I'm not shouting him out for any specific card, but he has so many cool, rare cards. These Gem Mint 10 oranges, they're tough to find. You know, even this Garrett Cole super short print PSA 10 rookie card is super hard to find. He just has tons of stuff that you just never see on his page. So that's my shout out this week. And I've done a deal with him. Actually, my Mookie Betts golf cart image variation was from him, and he's a good guy as well. Anybody else have anyone they want to shout out, or is that a good place to wrap it for today?
I think we're good.
Awesome. Well, thanks for listening. If you're on Spotify, appreciate it. Leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, feel free to subscribe. If you do so, it helps the channel grow because other people will find the content through the algorithm. And other than that, let us know in your comments below if you're concerned about the state of the hobby with repacks and breaking, or if you're happy with how things are going for you and your collection. And we will see you in the next video.